Our Kind of People, a Black Ocean short story. Written by J.S. Morin. Narrated by Michael Naramore. The stars shone as a backdrop to destruction. Vented oxygen plumed out as brief gouts of flame. Captain Gertrude Fontaine leaned with both hands atop a cane that used to be more decorative than it was these days. Through the front view screen of the Kingdom by the Sea, she witnessed the death throes of the scrappy little Walla Walla, brave protector of the now helpless passenger transport Olympia. Though clearly delusional, the captain of the transport powered engines and made a run for it. From where? To where? To what end? No matter, for Captain Fontaine would catch them again, and then her purse would grow fatter.
"Target engines, Bernice,"
Gertrude ordered. Her cane clopped, and she gave it a little waggle and flourish with each step as she ambled back to her seat in command. Age was a bitch. Retirement loomed. No, retirement stalked. Money would be no object. Her war chest burgeoned with currency of all manner. Digital terras lay waiting in banks across a dozen star systems. She owned half a dozen middling legitimate businesses through shell companies. A fussy lacou by the name of Marmo was at this very moment coordinating construction of a villa on a little asteroid she'd bought a few years back and had only gotten gravity installed on last spring.
"The engines, Bernice. I said the engines." "Sorry, ma'am. They're employing evasive maneuvers."
Gertrude shook her head.
"They're a bathtub with ion faucets out the back, slippery as a tortoise. A tree could chase them down. Quit venting oxygen my prizes need to breathe and knock out the goddamn engines."
She avoided raising her voice, but her ire was clear to all her crew. It took another 2 minutes, which was 3 more than it damn well should have taken, but Bernice managed to disable the Olympia. With her target dead in the water, Captain Gertrude Fontaine opened a comm.
"If you surrender, we'll take you for ransom, you wretched, doomed souls of Olympia. No matter if pretty or handsome, because this whole matter is simply a financial transaction and then some. Hope for the wise souls of Olympia."
A scattering of polite applause followed the closing of the comm channel.
"No response, Captain." "Course not. No fucking appreciation of the effort. Would it be easier to just show up, cannons ablaze, and wrench them bodily from their vessel? You're goddamn right it would be. But we show respect for the process, for the tradition."
She flung a disdainful hand at the crippled vessel on the view screen.
"It's like improv with a wallflower." "So, shall we?" "Yes!" Captain Fontaine snapped. "Send the fucking boarding parties over. They don't get not slaved on account of failing to acquiesce."
The ransom was in accordance with another less noble tradition, a polite euphemism. A lie, if one were to be so crass as to call it out. And no one was coming to save the wretched, doomed souls aboard the Olympia. Venison Simmons had come to hate boarding actions. He still walked with a limp from spraining a knee last time out, not wanting to admit that some lad whose voice hadn't dropped yet had busted a golf club trying to fend him off. And he'd bought his custom-fitted armor vest before getting his nipples pierced. Now every movement chafed, and he didn't have the funds for a refit at present. Still, Venison had a job to do, and his own personal coffers to fill. The plunder tax was only 50% of his haul, so getting sent over was technically a privilege, not a burden. Shouts and blaster fire and crashes of luggage and shrieks and sobbing and thuds, both fleshy and mechanical, assailed him on all sides. A helmet could only insulate a fellow's head so much before he couldn't tell what was going on around him any longer. On cue, a chair smashed over Venuson's head, sending him stumbling. When had these mid-tier starliners started supplying their overnight suites with cheap plastic chairs that weren't bolted to the floor? Well, since the chair was also both lightweight and wielded by a manicure-soft accountant, the blow surprised Venuson more than harmed him. Up came his blaster. Down went the would-be hero. Venuson's blaster rifle had caught him under the chin. For good measure, he flipped the weapon around and squeezed off a stun blast that would ensure the guy didn't sneak up behind him before someone came around to shackle him. Just as he was about to move on, he realized a mistake. Using a boot, he rolled the comatose accountant over so he didn't choke on his own blood. Guy might not have been worth much, but if it got back that Venuson had lost them a retail prisoner, the loss would come out of his cut. There was more to piracy than a simple life of leisure and brutality. Sound financial planning played heavily into it. Behind him, the low-seniority raiders rounded up anyone with a pulse, cuffing, hobbling, and hauling them back to the kingdom by the sea. Shit. He almost forgot the new system. Hustling back, he slipped a spray tinter out of his pocket, no bigger than a lipstick tube. He took a second glance when he couldn't find the spray top and realized that was because this was a lipstick tube. A quick search found the tinter, which was fractionally larger, had a pressed-down tip, and emitted a fine spritz of teal tint. With a deft flick of his wrist, Venuson marked his claim with a V so he'd get full compensation for this one. Lousy money was still money. Jogging to catch up with the main raiders, he switched his selector to lethal fire and used plasma to blast open a locked stateroom door. The seating compartment was empty, but nobody locked a damn door with no one inside when pirates came calling. This particular stateroom came with a private washroom, and this particular washroom was crying. Wrenching open the little swinging mechanism, Venuson remembered at the last second to return his selector to stunning fire. That was always a ball burner of a mistake. Loss of plunder and being the butt of all jokes until the next poor bastard did it. Inside the washroom was a scene Venuson had entirely envisioned in advance. A slim, toned young woman huddled on her knees, tucked down as if she could hide behind the toilet. She had short hair, but there was enough to grab a handful and force her to her feet. Any locomotion you could get out of a prisoner was a bonus. Even squirming and struggling, if they kept their feet under them, it was easier than dragging dead weight. But a curious thing happened on the way back to the corridor.
"What's that on your neck?"
Venuson demanded. Still in possession of her hair, he made the question moot by jerking her head aside to get a better look for himself.
"Holy... Are you..."
The woman nodded mutely as soon as he released his grasp.
"Are all of you here?"
Another nod. Venuson opened a comm.
"Captain, we've got a situation here."
"Who shot what, and how much is this going to cost me?"
"Not that kind of problem. The other kind."
"Pray tell, what other kind?"
Venuson looked Exandria Comenici up and down. She wasn't an original member, of course. She was half his age, and he'd been a fan since he was a kid.
"The kind where I think I just captured us the entire cast of Muse of the Heavens."
Exandria had been barefoot when the pirate accosted her, and besotted though he was, the man still had a blaster and the demeanor of a Roman gladiator. She wasn't about to ask him to please allow her back to her cabin for slippers.
"You're getting the star treatment,"
her pirate captor assured her, voice distorted inside that helmet whose red-tinged visor made his features demonic. Rather than the hair, he'd taken to steering her via the mag cuffs joining her wrists behind her. Unlike so many other prisoners she encountered, her ankles hadn't been shackled together with 10 centimeters of chain between them.
"So long as you point 'em all out to me, none of you and yours get more than a little rough handling."
Then he sprayed her with turquoise tinter like an animal marking its territory. When she coughed, he waved a hand in front of her face to clear the cloud of acrid scent that lingered.
"Anyone else gets to them first, I can't guarantee nothing," he warned.
Exandria had performed in more casinos than she could readily number, but she'd never been a gambler. Somewhere back home, tucked away between tours, was a whole collection of complimentary gaming chips she'd never used. But today, she took a chance that whatever fate this obvious fan had in mind for her was a damn sight better than what the rest of the passengers of Transgalactica Flight 815 from Barnard Star to Free Ride would receive. She found him the flutist and lutist. She ratted out the drummer. She pointed the way to acrobats and ballerinas. Exandria coaxed backup singers and soloists out of hiding. She failed to make eye contact with Devin, their manager, when he attempted to call out to her before they beat him with blaster rifles for stepping out of line. Nor did she mention her bodyguard, Cody, who was a little too free with his hands. All of this Exandria managed without speaking a word. She pointed with nose and chin. She led her captor like a bloodhound on a leash. She nodded assurance and offered weak, forced smiles to win over reluctant performers. While the others were crammed into the back of a mean little boarding shuttle, she spent the ride back to the pirate's ship on her captor's lap. He fielded questions about her and answered with better historical knowledge of Muse of the Heavens than even she could boast after 5 years with the troupe. He and his fellows looked at her like meat, and Exandria rather suspected she'd have to get used to that if they let her live. Admiral Emily Chisholm had waited 3 days to rendezvous with the Kingdom by the Sea. She'd always prided herself on patience, but with the teenager wearing thin her nerves of late, the wait had strained her hold on decorum. Now that wait was over. Captain Fontaine had been richly rewarded for her find. Her people had done a remarkable job of not only sorting the wheat from the dross of their otherwise dreary haul of slaves destined for the Eindar Empire, but also of recovering instruments, costumes, set dressing, and props. What had been lost or damaged had been inventoried and sent to the Admiral's own prop department for repair and replacement. The rest had already been delivered to the theater. The rest of the troupe was being hauled off to the brig in costume after her preliminary inspection. All but this one. Exandria Comenici stood stiff as a paused holograph. Her pale cheeks bore a slightly deeper flush than Emily's Cosmo team had given her. Her pupils flared wider than the lighting necessitated. Wearing a sheer costume that clung like an extra layer of skin, her trembling was impossible to hide.
Relax. Deep breaths. You are under my orders not to be harmed,
Emily assured the girl. She stalked around the stage where Exandria occupied a spot to which she must have been accustomed, the center of attention. On a hunch, she snapped her fingers. A spotlight winked on, bathing the star of the troupe in brilliant white light. Fascinating. She'd had that rare surgery to autocorrect for the glare. From centimeters away, Emily tried and couldn't make out the tiny membrane implanted behind her iris. Even under close inspection, the presence of the spotlight seemed a comfort to the singer.
It has come to my understanding that you do not speak, only sing. Is that true?
Exandria nodded.
Your med scans checked out. There's nothing wrong with you. I tolerate pretentious divas only so far. We will converse as adults. Is that understood? Yes,
Exandria caught herself, then tried again in a normal voice.
My apologies. Yes, Admiral.
Emily patted her on the cheek, then teasingly brushed her fingertips across that delicate jawline.
Much better. Now, business. Your failure to designate your manager as you saved your fellow performers, I cannot help but find intentional. That leaves the organization of Muse of the Heavens to...
She gave the singer a quick tap atop the head as she circled behind.
You? Me? But I'm hardly the most senior member. I didn't even attend college. I acquired multiple fine arts degrees and spent much of my time in college shagging my girlfriend. College does not define us.
Exandria scowled. Emily laughed.
Speak. Say it. Candor will get you farther than sullen dullness around here. It's just... this place seems exactly the intersection of a love of fine arts and the other thing. As for your obvious attraction, I'm flattered, but...
Emily's arms draped over Exandria from behind. She spoke directly into the singer's ear.
Did you know that I hate Brussels sprouts?
Stiff with fear, the singer shook her head.
Truly, I utterly despise them. Genetic, it seems. My daughter feels the same about them. Won't eat them at blaster point. And I've tried. When I was a girl about her age, my Nana took me out to a fine restaurant. Chef was from London Prime, some Peruvian name that escapes me. It was my birthday, and this was a treat. Anything less than delight on my part would have gone very poorly for this unfortunate creature whose entire life was built around the mastery of 100 culinary techniques and scores of virtuoso dishes. Yet, he served Brussels sprouts.
From so close, Emily could hear the gulp.
What do you think happened to that chef? I imagine your Nana paid him handsomely. He continued a long and storied career.
A nervous titter escaped the singer. She even giggled on key.
So you liked them after all? No, I despised every bite. But I also appreciated the chef. Art takes many forms, and he was an artist. As a performer myself, even back then, I acted as if I were as delighted as my Nana expected. Perhaps she saw through my act. I've reviewed my earliest recorded performances, and with an objective eye, I wasn't that good. But it made Nana happy. That's what mattered. That was a wonderful story. No, it wasn't. It was a horrible story with a horrible moral, but it's one you need to learn. Tonight, you'll perform on this very stage with your colleagues. You will be attended to by the finest backstage crew in the Poet Fleet. Meals will be prepared for you, catering to any and all dietary requirements. When you sing, I will be in the center of the front row with my daughter, and despite a full house, you will be singing to her directly, and you will have her fullest and undivided attention.
Emily came around and took both Exandria's hands in hers, though the singer's grip was limp and tentative.
How does that sound? Very generous of you.
Letting go with one hand, she towed Exandria along on a backstage tour.
After tonight's performance, your troupe will be moved from the cells to guest accommodations on par with some of Earth's finer hotels. So long as they cause no trouble and continue to perform, their privileges will expand over time. Does that seem fair?
The singer had been gawking as Emily led the way through makeup and costuming facilities that looked more like a dedicated theater than a starship. She snapped her attention back to the Admiral in an instant.
More than fair, considering the circumstances.
Excellent, because these circumstances only apply to your fellow performers,
not you.
Exandria's breath caught in her lungs. This timidity would only be endearing for so long.
What about me?
Yours
will be the finest quarters aboard the Look Upon My Works, Ye Mighty and Despair. After tonight's performance, you will be brought to my quarters, expertly bathed and costumed according to my desire. Once I have discharged the remainder of my duties for the evening, I shall return to my quarters, our quarters, and you will be awaiting me eagerly. And then, for the sake of your fellow performers' continued comforts, you will perform. And though I hope you will in time learn to like them, you will be eating your Brussels sprouts.
The lights were low and ethereal. Not a seat was empty, nor did a peep issue from any member of the audience enthralled by the performance up on stage. Exandria Comanici ascended a tower of acrobats costumed to resemble a mountain and function as the set for this scene. She danced up and down as she sang, twisting and twirling, not missing a note or her footing, despite a jumbled landmass of knees and hands and calves and shoulders. At the culmination of her solo, the mountain unraveled itself upward. Acrobats that had formed a vague pyramid before now stacked one atop the next without any interim step. At its base, the new tower boasted a brawny specimen fit for crushing rocks in his bare hands. The acrobats sorted themselves by size and strength until Exandria perched atop the head of the smallest acrobat, 10 meters up and all of perhaps 40 kilograms herself. From that lofty height, and without ceasing for so much as a flute solo, she continued to sing the praises of Freya. All of Muse of the Heavens' music was religious, just not in the conventional sense. They drew from pre-digital human societies from all over Earth. Roman, Greek, Egyptian, Buddhist, Abrahamic, and Mesoamerican mythologies all got their due. But tonight was a Norse tribute. Emily gave the quickest of glances to find Charlotte at her side, hands clasped in nervous tension at the danger she witnessed even as her eyes gaped at the beauty. When Exandria plummeted, the crowd gasped, but only before breaking into thunderous applause as black-clad assistants caught her at the last moment and she sang the final notes of My Ravens, My Thunder. Charlotte leapt from her seat to lead the cheers. Emily rose as well, keeping her applause enthusiastic but dignified.
"This is the best birthday gift ever, Mother,"
Charlotte said amid the ovation.
"May I keep them?" "They are yours, my poppet. All but my new little angel. Do with them what you will. They will perform their hits or your original compositions. They will arrange performances per your whim. And since you are of an age where you have such thirsts, slake them as you see fit."
Charlotte's face scrunched, and she lowered her voice to a whisper as the applause finally died out.
"Mother, please, not in front of everyone."
Emily sat. The girl continued to vex her. There was a fascinating question in play here regarding heredity, upbringing, and so many aspects of her own personality. As best she could mimic, this was just how Nana had raised her. tutors, lessons, opportunities that poor little law-abiding planetary girls could never dream of. Yes, she'd prodded her daughter into magical studies, but that was a long-standing wish of her own. Dependence on hired wizards for protection from charms and spies numbered among her chief fears, and it was not to be one Charlotte would suffer. Charlotte sat beside her as the music rose in anticipation of the next number, pupils wide, cheeks flushed. Though she could discern no particular target, the girl was openly admiring someone up there. Maybe several. Maybe Exandria. If Charlotte asked, Emily would have any member of the crew bound and gagged and blindfolded for her to play with in relative safety. Any fetish, any whim, any sensation was hers to experiment with. A young Emily had taken up Nana's offer of similar freedom and power so many times that limits had to be imposed. Where had she gone wrong? That thought still lay heavily on Emily's mind as the performance ended. Then she and Charlotte parted ways for the evening, and the Admiral turned her attention to anticipation of breaking in a new bedmate. In the weeks and months that followed, Muse of the Heavens was the talk of the fleet. Requests came in from every ship, every outpost, every planet-side front for local performances. And when Emily refused to allow the troupe off the Look Upon My Works Ye Mighty and Despair, those requests turned into personnel transfers, inspection tours, and other various excuses to depart one's own domain and seek the rapturous spectacle only available aboard the Poet Fleet flagship. It got to the point where, in the interest of dissuading attempts to subvert the command structure of the entire fleet, Emily felt compelled to issue tickets. Much as she disliked the notion of bilking her own underlings, they practically begged her. Week by week, Emily got to see more and more of Muse of the Heavens' repertoire. A run of Cat and Jackal kicked off a wave of bod mods among the fleet, mainly for feline ears. One of her captain's bootlegged recording of Star and Stable became a black market bestseller. By the time the troupe was performing Winner of the Apple, Emily had grown her plaything's confidence to the point where she forewent a costume and performed in gold body paint. Somewhere around the time Muse of the Heavens was putting on Yin and Yin, Charlotte stopped attending the performances. Thus, she wasn't there when a wobble called in the spotters and resulted in 3 emergency treatments in medbay. It was the 3rd month of Muse of the Heavens' residency aboard the Look Upon My Works Ye Mighty and Despair. Development was underway on an all-new play pilfered from Charlotte's hacked datapad and hopefully ready to make a Christmas present of its opening night. All the preparations, naturally, had to be kept secret or the surprise would be ruined. These mother-daughter spa days were a time when the troupe could rehearse bits and pieces, practice the staging, and just generally work on their craft without their young patron the wiser. Emily lay face down upon a massage table as Rudolphus utterly ravished the muscles of her upper back. Oil just shy of scalding oozed heat into the very fibers and loosened everything that tightened over the course of managing a fleet of pirates and a 14-year-old girl at the same time. The straps had been added to one of the tables when Exandria had been reluctant and fidgety when she started coming along once a week, but they worked just as well to keep Charlotte from claiming boredom and departing while Emily enjoyed the erotic portion of her treatment. Unfair slipping away while she wasn't thinking clearly. In protest of her confinement, Charlotte had taken to giving the silent treatment. Never willing to concede ground, Emily had returned the favor, and it was the younger Chisholm whose resolve broke first.
Mother, you know you're killing them, don't you? Surely you must realize.
Melodrama unbecomes you, Poppet. They're no longer vagabonds living out of suitcases, wondering whether they'll be replaced by some cheap new apprentice. They eat gourmet food, get regular health care. They're drugged to keep up a punishing work pace. They're given drugs to counteract the side effect of those drugs. 2 acrobats and Marcia, the woodwind player, have all had brain shunts installed to short-circuit the ability to feel fatigue.
Well, that little fact hadn't made it into any of the medical reports. Then again, they were Charlotte's toy. She'd only taken Exandria for herself. Looking after their well-being showed responsibility. Perhaps she ought to have started her daughter off with something easier, like a gerbil or hamster, but she'd never displayed any inclination toward pet ownership. At least, not before now.
Well, tell the doctors to stop if you like. It's understood fleet-wide that they are yours. But you mandate their performance schedule. Too much demand. One simply cannot deny this majesty to those who so desperately appreciate it.
It was clear the girl was attempting to imitate her, but over the past year or so, it had become simply impossible to tell them apart by voice. It was only by diction and quoting her verbatim that Emily could even identify the mockery.
You're murdering them slowly.
Emily tensed before answering as Rudolphus entered her. As always, he worked wonders within the confines of her mandate to keep her ever surprised and delighted.
You'd be amazed what the human body can adapt to. They will work within the confines set before them. Mother, either deal with Rudolphus or me. There's no call to minimize us both.
In a just galaxy, they'd have been experiencing this together. Any member of her crew could be over at Charlotte's table, her choice. Instead, her daughter chose to simply be pinned in place, bored in her own parlance, and listen to what she was missing out on. Perhaps one of these sessions she'd relent. Instead, today it was Emily's turn to give in. After a great shuddering breath, she accepted strong helping hands first to sit up, then to stand. Then she set to work unbuckling all the straps she'd cinched tight, restraining a younger, prettier version of herself, turning loose her future to flail free for another week in a vain hope of the girl ending up on track for greatness.
Very well. I'll look into the matter personally.
Something during the massage had clicked with her, and it had nothing to do with Rudolphus. If Henry V could walk among his subjects as a commoner and learn their true feelings about him, Emily Chisholm could do likewise. Her prosthetics people could work wonders, given a little time and direction. But for the masquerade the Admiral had in mind, all she needed was a few spare moments with an auto loom and the briefest access to her daughter's bedchamber for cosmetics and jewelry. Being dreary was a phase she'd outgrown decades ago, but she remembered all the styling and paid ample attention to Charlotte's predilections when it came to gloss, shading, and blending. All the rings fit her. She donned a spare cruciform necklace. She checked the sterility settings on Charlotte's lens cleaners before placing a pair of red into her own eyes. Last, but far from least, in an act of supreme dedication to her craft, she pierced her own septum without any ointment or numbing agent, seeing stars briefly before sticking a pair of silver horns through the new hole. She checked the mirror, twisted her hair into a quick updo, and decided that she looked enough like Charlotte to fool herself, let alone a bunch of near strangers. With that, she set off to discover the truth behind her daughter's accusations. All through the ship, she found herself treated as Charlotte. Her initial worries that her body's extra kilometers, and a pregnancy thrown in for good measure, gave her figure a distinctly different shape faded. Clothes helped a great deal. Plus, it would not have been beyond the pale for Charlotte to pad her bra. Au naturel, anyone with working eyes would have known the game in a quarter note. but her chameleon skin of dark Cosmo tints and leathery, lacy black everything else diverted attention.
"I'd like to see Marcia's medical records,"
phony Charlotte told Dr. Kleisman. The doctor was presently treating a fractured arm. She glanced up from her data pad.
"Is there a problem?"
Emily scowled and only hoped it wasn't too much a giveaway in mannerisms.
"Yes. You're not already handing over the medical records I asked for."
The doctor rocked back on her heels, and Emily realized that she may have overplayed her hand. She'd assumed that, out of sight of her mother, Charlotte was a snotty bitch to the rest of the crew as well. This called for improvisation.
"Mother tells me I must be more assertive. Is that going to pose an issue here?"
The doctor handed over a data pad after a few quick taps.
"No, not at all, Miss Charlotte."
Emily accepted the data pad and quickly browsed the contents. She didn't bother asking permission before backing out of Marcia Greenberg's record and checking on the other Muse of the Heavens members as well. Joint wear, ligament issues galore, fractures both micro and macro. Many were older injuries, documented but not sustained aboard the Look Upon My Works Ye Mighty and Despair. Others were newer, definitely suffered here. How many performances had she personally witnessed where an acrobat had a torn hamstring or pulled groin muscle? How many musicians were playing from muscle memory, barely able to feel keys and strings and hammers with finger joints nerve blocked? And nearly all of them were heavily dosed on multiple medications, mostly psychiatric or metabolism altering. Emily all but flung the data pad back at Dr. Kleisman.
"What would your treatments be if we ignored the performance calendar?"
"Oh, I think for Miss Greenberg, we'd start with a battery of—"
Emily put up a finger, ringed and with black-tinted nails. It could never have been her own.
"I have no medical background. Detailed explanations would do nothing for me. Simply begin treating them as you would our own people. The show mustn't go on if it's to be the performer's own blood oiling the wheels of the juggernaut that crushes them."
The doctor looked concerned.
"Are you feeling all right, Miss Charlotte? Do you need me to—"
Emily shot the doctor such a glare that the hand reaching for a nearby drawer paused.
"Never mind. You look fine. I'll get right on that."
Emily arrived at her quarters with a knot in her heart. She'd inflicted so many injuries, warranted and unwarranted alike, that she'd forgotten what regret even felt like anymore. Wanton cruelty was a bit of light fun when you didn't care a whit for someone's life, feelings, or soul, and it carried a weight of righteous vengeance when wrought upon someone whose life, feelings, and very soul demanded destruction. But the accidental harm to a troupe of galaxy-renowned performance artists struck a nerve.
"Miss Charlotte!"
Exandria gasped. Oh, shit. Her plaything had shackled herself to the bedposts, as she'd been trained. By design, she was unable to get herself loose. However long the wait, she'd be forced to stay that way until Emily arrived back to release her, exacting whatever price for that freedom she chose. Head flopped back over the foot of the bed to see her. Exandria squirmed and flailed and attempted to roll upright.
"I'm sorry. This isn't any way to—" "Please, if you could just come over and grab the key on the bedside table there."
"My songbird, you ought not prevail upon my daughter's soft heart like that,"
Emily scolded. She swayed over to the bed, slightly unused to the awkward, clunky-heeled clogs her daughter had grown fond of.
"Oh, Admiral,
Emily traced a finger along bare flesh and over the flimsy, sheer fabric of the nightgown that was more a temptation than an attempt at modesty. She'd beaten the modest out of this one. But now was, in fact, not the time. Letting her hand continue down to the hem, she tugged the lingerie back into place before climbing atop the singer and sitting astride her midsection.
"I've mistreated you, I realize."
"Admiral?"
There was an irony to this admission, made to a slave in all but name chained to her bed.
"I've driven you all too hard. Unfair of me. Art is sap, not juice. It must be tapped and allowed to flow, to trickle if it must. Squeezing the tree trunk just kills it. I saw Dr. Kleisman earlier. She thought I was Charlotte. I demanded to peruse your medical records." "Does Charlotte actually own us? Officially, I mean?" "There's nothing official anywhere around here, but yes, all but you. You're mine. I'm keeping you."
Exandria gave a couple little tugs that jangled her chains.
"Mission accomplished. The rest of your troupe will be departing the Poet Fleet next week." "What?"
Emily brushed aside a lock of hair from Exandria's face.
"My lawyers are working out details, but I'm purchasing your contracts at a steep discount. Muse of the Heavens will return to touring after a brief and much-needed vacation." "But what about me?" "You'll be remaining here, with me. What you make of that opportunity is up to you. My various playmates over the years have ended up as captains in my fleet or champion swimmers of the Black Ocean, and a myriad of fates between."
Exandria struggled futilely against both the chains and the larger woman atop her. Perhaps, the Admiral realized, up until this point she'd imagined the poets would grow bored and free her, or there would be some sort of rescue, or they'd enact an escape en masse. Now, the truth was settling in.
"Please, I've done everything you asked of me." "I haven't asked a damn thing of you," Emily snapped. "I have ordered, and I will continue to order, and you will continue to obey. The only one in this fleet who defies me without lethal consequence is my daughter. You will do everything you are told, nothing you are not, and you will comply with enthusiasm, eagerness, and a fervent desire that both of us enjoy your actions. Is that understood?"
There was only one correct answer here, and Exandria got it right, looking into Emily's eyes with tears in her own.
"Yes, Admiral."
Then, with the aplomb of a stage performer, she donned a glowing smile. Emily kissed her. Then, departing the bed, she crossed the chamber, clopping in Charlotte's annoying footwear. The shoes wouldn't make the return trip with her. The dress was as good as gone, but the rest of Emily's costuming was too much to deal with removing at the moment. There would be consequences come next Tuesday in her talk session with Dr. Lucretia, but she'd be playing the role of Charlotte tonight, it seemed.
"Excellent. Let us select from the Cabinet of Delights and celebrate this newfound understanding of your place in the galaxy."
Charlotte kept her eyes closed. Her fingers saw the keys without the need of eyes. Her ears told her when the melody was right. And while canon in D was beneath her abilities as a pianist, picturing the sheet music in her mind was still new and unfamiliar. More clearly than if it were paper before you, Wizard Patroclus had promised. Thus far, the promised page had been left in the rain and viewed through her mother's reading spectacles. Her mind's eye had a stronger astigmatism than her physical ones, and without the lenses resting on her irises, currently the violet pair from her collection, she'd barely be able to tell the staves held notes at all. It was an odd quirk of the Admiral's that she'd submit herself to all manner of cosmetic surgeries and procedures, but neither correct her own eyesight nor allow Charlotte the simple outpatient fix for hers. The instant she was off to university, she promised herself, it would be done within her first week away from Mother. A leather lash slammed down atop the piano. Internally startled, Charlotte kept from flinching and played on. "That wasn't on the sheet music," Wizard Patroclus accused. "You played that from memory." He'd purposely chosen a slightly stylized arrangement to vex her and force her to learn it his way. Charlotte took her hands from the keyboard and opened her eyes.
What am I playing it from, then, if not from memory?
It is not memory that concerns this lesson, but the means by which you memorize. Your old slovenly memories will never do. I am reshaping the way you think fundamentally. I informed the Admiral that you are a lost cause, but she insisted I make my best attempt. This is the only form of magic for which you've shown the least affinity, and it is still worse than teaching a dog to sing, because at least the dog would be trying.
Charlotte scowled up at the elder wizard. In truth, some decades younger than her mother, but carrying himself much more elderly. She knew that the shade of lens she wore numbered among her least intimidating, but she worked with what she had.
I'd have Mother castrate you, but I think you'd enjoy it too much.
Wizard Patroclus didn't so much as blink.
I will not supervise this farce any longer. Flip through one of the books from the paper library, something with illuminations. Then spend 2 hours meditating on the contents. Tomorrow we will meet in the art studio. You will recite the contents as you recreate the images.
As you command,
Charlotte replied with weary sarcasm. It mattered little how she treated Wizard Patroclus. She'd heaped more threats and abuse upon him than her 3 previous tutors combined. Unlike his predecessors, he'd been one of Mother's wizards for years, not a specialist in childhood magical education brought in as a consultant. As such, he had a better sense of the power dynamic in play. Mother wasn't going to punish him because Wizard Patroclus was following her explicit orders regarding Charlotte's education. On her way back to her quarters, she slipped a slender datapad out of her corset. Patroclus hated her accessing technology, particularly the Omni, but he wasn't about to frisk her. Even his leeway came with limits. In spite of her best efforts, the training had taken its toll. Other than a bit of a swipe and browse through gossip feeds and the occasional calm, she could barely fathom the device's functioning. It alerted her with an M-pop song she hadn't cared for in years, simply because, despite 2 new datapads in the meantime, she couldn't puzzle out how to change it. But keeping tabs on the salacious news of the galaxy's celebrities allowed her the illusion that planets and stations existed as more than dots on a tactical map. Let's see. Samamda Gaines and Brock Pidley were expecting a baby. Mindy Munn was getting her own talk program on GEN. The Kethlet Interplanetary Orchestra would be performing on Orion 4 next month. Perhaps if she didn't cause much trouble in the interim, Charlotte could prevail upon the Admiral on the grounds that it would help season her alias prior to college. Gail Banks was returning to prison for a parole violation, further delaying the release of her new album. Muse of the Heavens had broken up after lead singer Breonna Park, Charlotte's breath caught in her throat, fell to her death in a swan dive during a live performance that authorities were ruling a suicide. A note left via time-delay press release explained that she couldn't live her life in a cage no one else could see. The datapad clattered to the floor. Charlotte's heeled clogs were open-backed and kicked off in an instant as she broke into a barefoot run through the corridors of the Look Upon My Works Ye Mighty and Despair. She could only hope she was in time. The article had been posted during her lesson nearly half an hour ago.
"Mother!"
Charlotte called out.
"Don't do it!"
Her destination was a portion of her mother's flagship that she both loved and hated. The disciplinary deck boasted the best views anywhere but perhaps the bridge. 2 stories of wide panoramic windows with a mezzanine viewing level, plentiful seating, and a snack bar had made it a popular hangout among crew members and admirals' daughters alike. When not on pressing business, the Look Upon My Works Ye Mighty and Despair often parked and allowed anyone with free time to look upon the finest works of God and rejoice. Nebulas, ringed worlds, fleet maneuvers. They'd occasionally matched course with comets simply for the novelty. But the glass prison cell of an airlock front and center on the ground floor kept anyone from forgetting the place's true purpose: public executions. Charlotte pushed her way through a thick crowd that milled the lower level. Once the crew realized who'd arrived, they cleared her a path. Mother stood impassive, in full uniform, clasping her wrist behind her back. In recent months, she'd taken to dyeing her hair gray to match the growing minority color rather than cling to a shrinking majority hue that matched Charlotte's. It made her look older, colder even, and that coldness ran through to her heart. Inside the glass-steel airlock, Exandria pounded the walls with her palms, screaming and begging in silence as onlookers voiced no objection to her plight. Not until Charlotte arrived, at any rate.
Mother! Mother, you can't do this!
Without turning, without taking her eyes off her captive, and without raising her voice, the Admiral answered,
I can, I must, and I shall.
It was a suicide, Mother! A suicide! You can't blame Exandria for that!
I don't.
That declaration struck Charlotte a blow.
What? Then what's going on here? Let her go! You're scaring her! Can't you see she's terrified?
Listen for yourself.
Mother touched a button on the airlock controls. Speakers all around the disciplinary deck boomed the words spoken inside.
Charlotte, help me! Convince her! It's not my fault! I didn't put them up to it! I'm sorry! If I did anything to displease you, Emily, I'll make it up to you. Whatever it takes, whatever I have to do, I'll do it.
Emily twitched a faint smile, so brief it could have been missed during a blink.
So good of you to say that. Because, for the sake of the power my threats carry, you must die.
Charlotte physically interposed herself between the Admiral and the controls.
You can't do this. You love her!
Mother was a match for her in size and an experienced combatant, but Charlotte had been training in self-defense and wasn't a creaking sack of arthritic joints requiring multiple doctor's visits a week. She wasn't moving.
I've made love to her. Do not confuse the two. Of course, if you've grown attached, perhaps you've been fucking her behind my back?
Speak up. I haven't, Mother. And you do love her. I've seen it. I've seen you two together.
Well, there was no way to put this delicately, and the crew didn't care.
I've walked in on you and witnessed firsthand. She's not some toy you can just throw away.
A pity. If you had been taking her to your bed, that might have been the one act to save her. Alas, you insist on vexing me, even at the expense of a simple lie.
With a flick of the Admiral's fingers, a pair of strong, firm, but somehow vaguely respectful hands clamped around Charlotte's upper arms and deposited her some 2 meters away before she registered the action. Mother depressed a large red button meant for ostentation and pageantry with grisly purpose.
What? No!
The airlock force field vanished. With a rush of air, a wordless scream quickly cut off. As Charlotte sobbed, watching the last seconds of Exandria's life through the glass steel as she floated away from the ship, Mother made an announcement.
Exandria was a delight to all who knew her or witnessed her perform. Would that her associates had honored their agreement ensuring her safety. I shall remain celibate for 3 days out of mourning, and tonight we will perform her favorite play as a tribute. Please spread the word to all involved in our cast for a chorus line. I want a dress rehearsal in 2 hours' time. I will direct and play Val as per usual.
She clapped twice. Just like that, the pirates of the poet fleet dispersed. Exandria was dead, still visible out the magnificent panoramic windows, and they were already planning a tribute show. Worst of all, Charlotte would be expected to reprise her role as BB. But she'd do it, because Charlotte had just seen the kind of monster her mother truly was, and because Mother did love Exandria, and if there was a line between that love and the love she felt for Charlotte, she didn't dare cross it. Charlotte resolved to remain on her best behavior. If it was years yet until university, so be it. The stoicism Wizard Patroclus preached would become her shield. She would escape this life by embracing it outwardly. Well, at least mostly. She refused to debase herself for animal pleasure. But other than that, she'd do whatever Mother wanted. And tonight, that meant she'd dance to her mother's songs. Thanks for listening to this Black Ocean adventure. This mission may be over, but there's plenty more for you to enjoy. For more magical mischief in the 26th century, search Black Ocean on your favorite audiobook store or visit blackoceanmissions.com. This has been Our Kind of People, a Black Ocean short story, written by J.S. Morin, narrated by Michael Naramore. Copyright 2024 by J.S. Morin. Production copyright 2024 by J.S. Morin.